time, in the top 150 of all time. Erik Erlendsson, lightninginsider.com. You made the top 150. How does it feel?
It feels like there's only about 140 available for being considered. So that's how 150 feels.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
I'm good, man. Still trying to adjust to this whole offseason stuff. It's always a weird transition going from 100 to 0 in a snap. And I can't imagine what the players and staff and everybody have to go through. It's tough. It's a difficult transition. And I've been doing it for a long time. And I struggle with it every year.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm myself too. I mean, we're traveling back and forth. It's a rat race, and all of a sudden it stops. And I know you usually kind of write that story at the end of every year too about the suddenness of the finality of the season. And it's almost like you feel left out a little bit, right? When you see hockey still going, and then you see like the brackets on the side, and then you see like the Tampa Bay Lightning logo like faded off in the back. You're like, damn, man, I wish I was still traveling or covering this team or, going to morning skate. But that's the reality of the situation. Before we talk Bolts, I want to ask you what I was just talking about with the Maple Leafs. I wasn't buying this team being any different than anything else, but I feel like last night was in such a bad way, symbolic of what this Toronto Maple Leafs franchise is all about. You have this entire series right in front of you, and you lay the biggest possible egg. That was an ostrich egg that they laid last night. I mean, 6-1, and I don't even know if it was that close. They score a goal at the end of the game. I mean, I don't think there's any way. Just think about this. Think about this, E. We just talked about traveling. Think about the Toronto players, the Toronto staff, and some of the Toronto media traveling down to South Florida, knowing what could be in store for them in Game 6. They haven't shown me the type of mettle or fortitude that they would win this game against the Panthers at all.
Yeah, and I don't know if it defines the franchise just so much as it defines this iteration of the team.
This era.
Yeah, it's so much promise with Matthews and Marner and Nylander and Tavares, the core four, Morgan Riley. It's like as bad as Lightning fans are feeling. I mean, it could be a lot worse. And I know Toronto got to the second round, but look, this series is not over. I mean, you could always go down to South Florida and win a game and force a Game 7, which would be an interesting situation if it gets there. But it's to watch that team last night perform the way they did. I don't know if anybody was following me on social media, but every time the Panthers scored a goal, I had a little Ted Lasso meme kind of going to kind of describe how things were going for the Leafs. Everything was from the Leafs perspective, right? Because as much as it's about Florida, it's about Toronto. That's where all the eyes are at. All the eyes are looking at the team in blue over there to see how they're going to react, how they're going to handle this situation of the adversity, right? Look, I felt that having won the first two games, and then once they blew the 3-1 lead in a couple of shifts in the second period of game number 3, it felt like the Leafs were done.
Yeah, here we go again.
Like it's too hard. Mm-hmm. It's too hard. The Panthers obviously have been there. They've won it. They've been to 2 straight cup finals. They understand, as Connor McDavid most famously said, to dig the F down.
Right.
They know what that means. These Leafs don't know. Look, when they finally got over their hump and beat the Lightning a couple years ago, they were celebrating like they won the cup.
Right.
Like we saw the report from Chris Johnson, they brought more beers into the locker room. And then they turned around and got swept by the Panthers in 4 games in round 2. And, when they had a 3-0 series lead against the Senators and then lost the next 2, like you could feel it.
Yeah.
Like you could feel it all the way down here, the tension of that series. That was the series that went the longest in terms of days, and it started 3-0. Right? So now here you have this team, and anything can happen. They have the opportunity to change the narrative. That's right. Kind of what has to happen. And, I saw this from the Lightning in 2015, right? They were down 2 goals in the third period, about to go down 3-1 in the series to Detroit. Tyler Johnson and Andre Palat rescued them, scored 2 goals, and they were the ones that hooked up for the game winner in overtime to make that series 2-2. But they went back to Detroit, or they came back here and they lost. They were shut out in Game 5, going back to Detroit, and you felt it was over, right?
Mm-hmm.
They found a way to win Game 6, come back here and win Game 7. Now, that team had Ben Bishop. The Leafs have Joseph Wall, who I think is, look, every time we see Wall face the light, he looks like a Vezina guy.
Right.
He certainly hasn't looked that way in this series, and certainly not last night with a couple of those goals. But, yeah, this you saw it. Fans were throwing jerseys on the ice last night. I mean, it's just
wow.
And those aren't cheap. We know those are not cheap jerseys to send over the glass. And, if you're a Leafs fan, it sucks. I think for the rest of us from the outside, we kind of enjoy the entertainment value of it.
Oh, yeah, it's great when you're not involved, especially a team like Toronto that's been overhyped. What was your biggest takeaway? Now we're a couple of weeks removed from exit interviews. Out of all the things that you heard on that day, what was the kind of the number one thing that stood out to you?
Probably just the sting. We heard the word sting a couple of times from a couple of the guys, because this was a team that was built to do more than they did last year. It just was. And it felt different, sure. The way that they played the Panthers in this series compared to last year felt different for sure. You still ended up with the same result. And I think that's what kind of hurt a lot of these guys, because they felt they had a team that could do it. I mean, Vasilevsky was Vasilevsky, and, Ryan McDonough was back, and you felt that their 5-on-5 gameplay was good. And again, I think if they faced anybody but Florida in the first round, I'd like their chances of getting out of it. And I like their chances against the Panthers in this round. But they hadn't faced the Panthers with Tkachuk back and with Marchand there, and right, like they hadn't seen that lineup, and that third line from Florida just kind of took it to them, and really was the difference in the series in a lot of ways. So I think just the sting of how the season ended and the manner in which it ended is kind of what I took out of it, and that and listening to Nikita Kucherov. Right, we don't hear from him much. And when we do, he rarely says much at all. But I thought he was very informative and insightful. I asked him about what it takes to beat pressure like the Panthers give, because them and Carolina are the only team that will pressure the puck, and they don't give you anything free. And he talked about making the right reads under that pressure, right? Like that was a very insightful thing for him. And, he's probably already back on the ice working on his game, getting ready for next season. He said, hey, you want to come? Next week it starts, and that would be this week, obviously. So those were the two biggest things that I kind of took out of how the team felt coming off of that suddenness of the end of their season. It's like, okay, thanks, we're good. We'll see it. Maybe we'll see it next year, right? Like it's always the weirdness of a season ending suddenly and shorter than what you were anticipating.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think the one guy whose words stood out to me the most were Andrei Vasilevsky, because if you guys listened, Vasi was not of the, well, we were so close. Vasi was more of, I'm looking at the Panthers and how resilient and how consistent they were. I feel like Vasi was looking at it differently. Like, we do have to change things. We do have to get better. We do have to be more consistent, because that's the only way you're going to win. And for all the discussion of like, well, they would beat any team, but you got to be able to beat anybody because their goal is to be the Stanley Cup champions. Their goal is not to just get to the playoffs, or get through the playoffs. And I think one of the other things too, when I look at it, is, the future of John Cooper, which was, probably a story that shouldn't have been, and also the Isaac Howard situation. And I want to ask you about this, E, because he gets a lot of credit, deservedly so. He's a guy that gets grace, and he's earned it. But there's been some missteps here in the last, I'd say, 36 months by Julien BriseBois that has hindered the growth and the progression of this team. Doesn't mean that I think they should get rid of him. Doesn't mean I don't think he's a phenomenal general manager. But you look at the handling of the Stamkos situation, the trade for the Jeannot, the signing of Connor Sheary, Atkinson, the whole Isaac Howard thing, like, are 5 big things that are, he's done a lot of good things. What are you saying no for? What do you think?
Those are not 5 big things.
Okay.
They're not 5 big things. And look, the Tanner Jeannot trade, I gave up a lot for him. Didn't work out.
Okay.
But now everybody's saying, hey, we need a tough guy. Well, you had one. You ran him out of town, right? Because you didn't like the way that he played. Well, if you want a guy that just wants to sit there, and I've seen plenty of people, give me a guy that only has to play 3 or 4 times a year. Well, you had him, and you ran him out of town.
Right.
Didn't fit, obviously. And look, fair or not, we tie what a team gives up to how the player performs. And that's not fair on the player, but that's the way we view it. Right?
But it's fair on the general manager, though, because he's the guy that sets that price and he's the guy that executes that price, right? I mean, we got to call a spade, like we can't – we love the guy.
But if you're going to put down Julien BriseBois for acquiring Tanner Jeannot, you got to put it in the same context with Barclay Goodrow and Brandon Hagel and
I'm talking. But those deals have all happened before the Tanner Jeannot thing. I'm talking about Jeannot forward, right? Like I'm not saying he's a bad. I already said he's a fantastic general manager. I think he's one of the best in the game, but there has been missteps. I think we
and tell me where's the misstep with how he handled Isaac Howard. Because this is more Howard.
That's my question. Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, this is more Howard than the team because the team was a little hamstrung, and maybe you could pinpoint to how they manage the cap, but you have to manage the cap for your team right now. Right. So, there wasn't any cap space to bring Howard in right away, and I think if there was, maybe that changes things. But when the player pushes back saying, I don't want to go to Syracuse, I'm not going – basically he said, I'm not going to Syracuse. I mean, what can a general manager do there? He doesn't have the cap space, right? He doesn't have the ability to bring that player in like you want.
So do you think that changed? Do you think that
yes.
So you think that early on he was okay with going to Syracuse?
Hey, you had conversations. We listened to Julie, and I've talked to other people in the organization. They were very confident that Isaac Howard was going to join there.
That's what I say. He brought it up to us during the fireside chat. Like we didn't bring it up. He brought it up.
Yeah.
So we were all walking out of there that day going, all right, well, he brought it up. He's probably going to be a part of this team. So you don't think that I guess that's my whole thing. All right, let's say that's the point though. So is it just one of those things where you just give the benefit of the doubt to Julien in that aspect of, knowing
I just don't know how he could have handled it any different. If the player is going to be this way, I don't know how Julien could have handled any different because you don't want to push aside somebody that's been loyal to you or push aside cap space or save cap space for something that may not happen. Now, what really screwed this up was Michigan State getting knocked out in the first round of the regionals. If Michigan State had reached the Frozen Four like they were expected to, well, that's 2 weeks down the road.
Right.
And by the time he would have been done, I think this whole situation plays out differently, right? So a lot of circumstantial stuff went against the Lightning in this situation because he wanted to sign right away. And look, from his standpoint, I get it, right? He's looking around and a lot of the guys that he's played with, especially those that he came up through the National Development Program with,
right?
The Boyums, the Ryan Leonards, the Frank Nazars, they're all in the NHL already. Well, he's just as good as them. He was a leading scorer on that team as last year in the National Development Program. So, from his standpoint, I get it. There's the ego that kind of drives some of these situations sometimes too. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
No, you got to have one.
Yeah. And so he's looking at it and go, well, wait a second. All these guys are jumping straight to the NHL. Why do I have to go to the AHL? And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure somebody will, but I believe Elliott reported that Howard and his camp used the and I'm paraphrasing here, I can make more money in NIL than I can in the AHL. Right. So that kind of NIL kind of changed some of the situations here too, because if you look at it during the Big Ten championship, when we were talking a lot about Isaac Howard,
right,
you saw the team promoting him.
Yeah.
Adam Hall, Michigan State grad, was on the broadcast with Paul Kennedy holding up those Be Like Ike shirts and telling fans how that they could buy those. And some of those proceeds were going directly to Ike Howard as part of the NIL. And then it just went away. Like they mentioned that he won the Hobie Baker. Things. So
they
everything was
stuff on social media. Yeah.
Things were moving in a very positive direction until they weren't.
So why? But that's my whole point, though. He is like, so I don't understand why the Lightning were surprised. Like, if he went to go see him 4 times this year, his talks with in the beginning of Isaac Howard's college season, Isaac Howard and his representatives didn't know that Julien would want him to go down to Syracuse before he went to the big club?
I don't know if that conversation was had. I think,
but that's what I'm saying. Like if that's his mode of operation.
But
hey,
it has to be in your mind.
No,
if
I know.
You're a player of that caliber, you have to understand that that's a possibility, and the team controls. This. So this is the difference between ego and pride. Right? Ego can drive you, but your pride can hurt you. And I think in some ways, Howard being asked to go down to Syracuse hurt his pride. And he has leverage, right? So he used it. So his pride pushed him in another direction to say, I don't want to go to Syracuse. Okay, fine. I'm done with you guys. I'm going to use my leverage.
So do you think that maybe changed? Do you think like maybe he knew the circumstance early on in the year, and then
I don't think he wanted to believe it.
And then as the year went on, and his success probably was his downfall because he just kept playing better and getting better and getting better. And then it was just like, all right, well, this is how they usually
kept going.
Yeah, so but so I just don't. So you don't make an adjustment there if you're Julien and the Lightning for a guy like this?
Personally, yeah, I would have.
But that's my point though, right? Like, so if you agree, if you think that, and I think that, right?
That doesn't mean it's a mistake by Julien.
Like, but
it's just the way I think and the way you think.
But no, I understand that, but
from my standpoint,
he's not perfect. He's not perfect. Like
no,
he's
not.
But
no general manager is.
No, of course. But that's my point. Again, I think it's important to be able to critique a guy that has had a fantastic track record because he's not perfect. And I it's hard for me to believe that he handled this Isaac Howard and he's not at fault at all. Like
of course
he couldn't have checked in, and especially knowing that, and I'm not talking about not bringing Stamkos back, but when it comes to the whole Stamkos situation of not getting in contact with his representatives and things like that, where there was a question of the bedside manner and the lines of communication. How do you not? Like, that's how we make better decisions in the future. That's how we try to put pieces together by using all the information that we do have. And I'm with you. Maybe he did tell him early on in the year, like, you're probably going to go down to AHL. But when the guy's playing well and then you're promoting him on social media, maybe it's a good idea to check back in with him to be like, hey, we still want you to go to Syracuse. Then if Isaac Howard does, like, of course, we're not privy to all that information, but I mean, I don't know if Julien gets a 100% pass here for his role in this entire situation.
But I don't think it's necessarily a mistake. I think it's just the way things worked out. It's two sides that have different rationale in how they got to the point that they got to. And look, if you want to place blame on one over the other, that's fine. I'm not usually that kind of a person. That's just not who I am.
Yeah, and I don't think Isaac Howard, and I don't think it's all Julien and not Isaac Howard either. But like you just mentioned with the pride too, like, is there a pride thing on the Julien side too? Like, well, this is the
organizationally, yes.
Yeah, so I mean,
so
because we just talked about it, like the social media posts, like, that was almost like, hey, you're in a relationship with somebody. It's not going well. Let's take a couple of selfies at the Strawberry Festival. And, hey, we're such a happy couple. That's where I was kind of like, all right, well, now looking back on it, if the relationship wasn't great, was that really in good faith? Or was that one of those things, you know what I mean? Like, where was that? Where was the motive from that?
To me, like, you talk about pride with the player, there's an organizational pride.
Right.
But there's also an organizational track record.
Mm-hmm.
They have done things in a way which has helped them win championships. And if a player wants to dig their heels in and say, no, I don't want to do it your way, could you, like, here's the catch-22 if you're in Julien's shoes, the organizational shoes. If you give in to Isaac Howard on this situation, well, now you've opened a door.
Yeah, you're right.
Right? So I think if you're looking at things from an organizational standpoint, there's been one player under Julien / Steve Yzerman who has bypassed the American Hockey League and come straight to the NHL when they didn't have AHL eligibility, right? Mikhail Sergachev and Jonathan Drouin were both back to juniors or NHL. They were 19, couldn't go to the AHL. But it's Braden Point. And Braden Point actually got in a handful of games in Syracuse the year before. You know, his final year junior, he played some games in Syracuse and then made the team out of camp. But and this is the difference between college players and junior players. Braden Point had been to 2 training camps. He had shown himself in training camp the year before, in 15, 16. He had proven he was this close to making that team this year. But they felt another year in junior was going to serve him better than starting out in the NHL. He's not the biggest guy in the world and everything like that. So that's the organization can say, look, Nikita Kucherov, we needed to develop Nikita Kucherov. He played half a season or 2 months in the American Hockey League, and look how that worked out. Anthony Cirelli, look how that worked out. So the organization has pride, yes, but they also have a proven track record of developing players. They have been a model for developing young players. The issue here is they've never had a college player of this caliber.
That's my whole fly in the ointment there of the entire thing. Of at what point do you and I'm with you, because you're right. You acquiesce to this one guy, then the next prospect is going to be like, well, you did that for Isaac Howard. Well, how come he didn't have to do it? But there is that caveat, Eric, of like, and you and I have talked about this. They haven't had a prospect like this in a while.
Not in college.
Not in college either, right?
And like college is different.
Yeah.
Because college has that leverage, right? Those guys have the right to play out their 4 years in college and then pick their team. And that's part of the CBA. I'd like to see that changed. You know, why do players who go to college have that special privilege, whereas guys in the CHL or Europe don't have that? Like, why do they get special exemption? So I would like to see that change. I don't think it's going to. I don't think the Players Association is going to want to give that up in negotiations. But personally, I'd like to see that go by the wayside. But they've never had a guy that you could legitimately talk about as a Hobey Baker candidate. Obviously, he went on to win it. You know, they've had guys who have finished in the top 10, and they've had guys but they've never had a guy who finished in the top 3. And certainly they've never had a guy who won it. And so, you know, it is a different situation and how to deal with this. But I mean, you know, some other guys that come to mind, you know, Justin Schultz. Remember when Justin Schultz came out of college? I think he was at Wisconsin, and Anaheim held his rights. You know, great player coming out of college, right shot defenseman. He exercised his rights.
Yeah, Adam Fox did the same thing too.
Yeah, and he was traded around a couple of times, right?
Yeah,
he would go from Carolina to Calgary
to the Rangers,
the Rangers before he signed,
Yep.
because he wasn't going to sign with those two teams.
No.
Now, having said all that, I don't expect Howard, who's with Team USA at the World Championships, he's dressing as a 13th forward, so he's not playing a prominent role for them. But if he can get into a game or two and get some ice time and showcase himself, it's just going to help the Lightning.
What's the next step, E? Do you think they trade him? Do you think they just let him go?
I think he's traded.
At the draft?
I think he gets traded at the draft.
Yeah.
And you know, if, again, this is nothing I know, but behind the scenes, if the Lightning are not going to his representation and saying, hey, find a team.
You have to, right?
And we'll work out a trade.
You have to, right? That's the kind of thing.
Right. Because I don't think deep down in my heart, I really don't think Isaac Howard wants to go back and play another year of college. I think he's ready to start his pro career, and he can always change his mind if his rights get traded. Look, he could change his mind if he wanted to sign with the Lightning. He could, but he lost the opportunity to sign his entry-level contract, burn it, and then start the countdown clock to free agency 1 year sooner. So that is gone. All right, so he can't do that now. But he could still sign a contract prior to August or September, leave school, and start his pro career. That's why I fully anticipate, with the way things have transpired, that Isaac Howard will be dealt at the draft or around the draft or before free agency. Right. One of those two things. The question is going to be, what kind of a return do you? Can you get a Jamie Drysdale type player?
Yeah.
He's certainly in that caliber.
Better than Gauthier.
Yeah. So it's just a question if you can find the right team and the right deal to make it work. But you're not going to get a haul.
Yeah.
You're not getting Quinn Hughes.
No. But you need a guy like that, like a young stud player, change of scenery type, maybe a guy in a bad team, you know, Trevor Zegras, maybe something like that. But Trevor Zegras? No,
I don't think I want Zegras.
We know Isaac Howard's not going to be on the team next year, but what other changes do you foresee as far as the construction of this roster? Guys, you know, coming back, guys being traded, Do you see any big names possibly being on the move for this team?
I don't. Just listening to Julien talk and some of the players talk about how much they believed in this team, how much they like the team. I mean, look, Julien, shot off those numbers to us about only 8 teams in the salary cap era have finished top 6 in goals for, goals against, power play, and penalty kill, and none of them have gone on to win the Stanley Cup.
That's crazy.
Like that's just playoff hockey.
Mm-hmm.
So I think obviously there's tweaking and like this is not a comparison to 2019, but I think the mindset is the same. Okay, we feel we had a good team. We feel that we were close. It didn't work out for us, but we feel that we're close. They're not an organization with Julien at the helm that reacts emotionally.
Yeah, you're right.
Right? They react analytically. They take a step back and analyze things. So I fully expect that we won't see big names moved. I don't think Nick Perkins will be back. We'll see about Glendening. He's not the biggest guy, but he plays a very solid role on this team. We talked about the lack of size amongst their forward group. Do you tweak things that way? So I look for more tweakings. And then we'll see. There's a little bit more salary cap space to work with now, right? The cap is jumping, $7.5 million, I think.
So where does that money go? Yeah.
Some of it's already going to Victor Hedman, who gets a little bit of a raise with his extension kicking in. Jonas Johansson got a little bit of a raise on his 2-year extension. So there's pieces of it kind of being chipped away. We'll see what they want to do with Yanni Gourde. But if we're talking about bigger forwards, Yanni Gourde certainly doesn't fit that one. Bigger heart, yes. Bigger forward, not necessarily. So I expect that the bottom lines to kind of be tweaked around a little bit. And where does Bjorkstrand kind of fit in now? Is he a top 9? Is he a top 6? They got a year to kind of figure that out. Do they look to extend him? Right, he's a 5.5, 5.25. I think is what his current cap hit is this year. So I expect offseason tweaking. I don't expect offseason changes in a lot of ways because this is still a good hockey team.
Yeah, and I look at some of the positions, bottom, McDonough and Chernak obviously going to come back, and Hedman and Moser. I feel like the top 4 guys. That bottom pairing is going to be interesting to see because you and I both spoke about a little surprise that Max Crozier was a guy that didn't get more of a look this year. They put all their eggs in that basket of rotating that Perbix, Radish, Emil Lilleberg thing, and they kind of go with Lilleberg Crozier, right, as the third pair. You would think going into next year.
I would think so, especially, with the chemistry those two guys showed at Syracuse, with the chemistry they showed when Crozier was up last year, right? Like those two were so good together. You hope that you could recreate that magic. Yeah. Or recreate that chemistry from the two. And if you look at Lilleberg, boy, what valuable minutes he's getting right now at the World Championships. Captain. He's 4th in average ice time among all players. There. So he's taken on a very prominent role for Norway, which almost shocked the U.S. yesterday, right? Down 5-1. They came back to tie at 5-5. Now he took the penalty in overtime that led to the game-winning goal. But, but those are valuable minutes. And I know it's not best on best, but it's still top level, senior level. We've seen Erik Chernak grow from there. Braden Point when he went. Brandon Hagel last year got some valuable minutes. Playing for Team Canada in that situation. So those are valuable learning, especially for a guy like Lilleberg. I think we forget sometimes the lack of experience that Lilleberg has. Yeah. Right. John Tortorella used to always say it takes 250 to 300 games for defensemen to figure things out. Right. He's not there yet. He's only got he doesn't have 2 full seasons under his belt. He came up, halfway or, a couple of months into last season. So this was his first real full season in the NHL. And I think that the Lightning still see a lot of promise in him. He's obviously got a lot of size. He's physical. There's a lot of elements to like about Lilleberg. But unfortunately, when he makes a mistake, it tends to be a pretty bad one. Yeah. And those stand out. Right. So, but he's getting valuable time there. But I would think that, if assuming you let Perbix go, Radish is still under contract for a year. But I think he would just slide Lilleberg and Crozier in. And that will allow you to let J.J. Moser fit into a role. Like Moser was all over the map this year, right? Obviously right side on Hedman early in games, late in games, but he would take shifts on the left side with Radish or Perbix, and just the way that However, Rob Zettler was kind of running the bench there. But that would seem to me like a perfect assimilation into next season to kind of shore that up because, I'm with you. I like their top four.
Offensively, as far as bringing in another guy, what kind of forward? You mentioned the size, but I mean, is it a middle six guy? Because I think you look at who they have, like where I think Connor Geekie, right? I mean, he's another guy where there's some good players on this team, man. And I looked at that Geekie, Nick Paul, Gonsalves line, and I'm like, that could feed families, man. I mean, that there was just something about that line, right? So then do you put Bjorkstrand with Cirelli and Hagel, and then you put, Gensel back up with that top line? I mean, if you had it the way you had it and all 9 guys are healthy, because I think the fourth line they're going to have to figure things out. They bring Gord back on that fourth line. Do you bring Glendening back? What happens? You're right. Like, figure out the fourth line when you get it. What happens with a guy like Mitchell Chaffee, who, when he came back in the lineup, I thought he did some good things there at the end of the playoffs. If you had it the way you had it, who would be the 3 lines, their top 9 there?
Well, I think Bjorkstrand goes with Cirelli and Hagel. I think that's what they had as an idea when they acquired him. There must have been something they didn't like in practice because we never really saw it in the game, which surprised me. We saw it run those lines in practice early on, but we never saw it in the game. They'll have a whole training camp to kind of work together and see if there can kind of be a fit. But yeah,
and they do that, right? Like where it seems, because I remember when they acquired Hagel, Coleman and Goodrow, and they're like, oh, those guys will play together. And then in the beginning, it was like, no, they're not going to play them together. They separated. And then like a couple weeks into it, it was just like, and then they couldn't get apart.
Well, and Hagel's the best example there because, they brought him in with the idea of being a top 6, but you look at the way that he played in that run to the Cup final in 2022, he was in a checking line role with Cirelli and Killorn.
Yeah.
He wasn't in the top because he had a little bit more of a adaptation period as opposed to a guy like Nick Paul. And then you look at Hagel coming in for his first full training camp and how much he felt comfortable, much more comfortable he felt coming into that camp and really kind of found his way there. And now he's a, 35, 90 point guy. So I mean, Bjorkstrand's a little bit older. Obviously he's 30 years old. He's more advanced in his career than Hagel was at the time, but I think, they'll give that a look in training camp to see how it goes. I really like the way Gage Gonsalves came on the last couple of months of the season. He looks so much more confident in his playmaking ability and everything else. And I thought he was one of their better guys in that series against the Panthers.
Right.
Like he was consistently on the puck, consistently confident with the puck. So that's a good thing to see. So yeah, it's the fourth line. Chaffee has to use the body. I think he led all forwards in hits or at least average hits per game. I think, Gergensons is obviously going to be there, but I don't know. You look at the way that Florida was able to kind of push them around a little bit, and be, some would say, cross the line physical with them, similar to what the Panthers are doing to the Leafs. Do you have a guy that can withstand that and hold up to that? Right. And, so that's the area where I think you end up looking to tweak at. I think you look at their top 9 right now. I don't want to say it's set because I never say anything is set after coming off a season and going to training camp because anything can happen. But you look at the 9 we kind of just talked about there. That's a pretty good top 9 if they continue to play the way they did at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I just wonder, like, if you do make a change there, if you do trade one of the big guys, like, because who do you trade? I don't know if they will trade any of them. Like, who do you get? Who do you trade and get? A return that you thought that you were going to get.
You're not going to get it.
Yeah,
you're not going to get it. So look, I know obviously there's a lot of talk around Nikita Kucherov, who we found out was dealing with the wrist injury from February on. About him being the guy, right? Because he didn't show up in the playoffs and didn't perform to the level that you want to see a guy who led the league in scoring perform at. And I get the criticism, but he's a generational type talent, and he's still just 31 years old. He's still, getting better. And, you talk about leadership. Okay, so Nikita Kucherov is not the most vocal guy. He's not a guy who's going to stand up in front of the room and yell at people, but he is going to show you how to get there. Right? We just talked about the Camp Kucherov.
Right.
That's leadership. And like he was being serious when he said, okay, it starts next week. Like, I know we all kind of got a chuckle out of it, but he was dead serious. That's who Nikita Kucherov is. I work at my game. This is how I work on my game. You want to come be a part of that? Come and be ready to work. Like, his work ethic is unbelievable. We don't see it, and he rarely talks about it. But there are not anybody who works harder than Nikita Kucherov. There might be some who work as hard, but there is nobody that works harder at his game than Nikita Kucherov. To me, that's a form of leadership that probably doesn't get talked about in leadership circles. I mean, there's a reason why he wears an A, and it's not because of the way he speaks to the media.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? It's the other things that he does, and that's just part of leader. Because it used to be a rotational A. Mm-hmm. He had it all year long.
Yeah. What's going on lightninginsider.com, man? Everything wrapped up throughout the year now.
Yeah, I still have some stuff I want to get to that came out of exit interview day. I was out of town over the weekend for a funeral, so I've been out of loop for.
Sorry for your loss.
Thank you. For 4 or 5 days, I'm still trying to get caught up in freelance work and everything else that's kind of going on. The TV deal that was announced yesterday.
Oh yeah, what do we know about
the
that?
Lightning? Yeah, so look, it's a good thing because. Yeah. I mean, how many people have you heard from? And I know I've heard from, where can I watch the game tonight? Where can I watch the game tonight? Now you're going to have, if you're in the local region, if you're in the viewing market, which extends all the way up to North Florida, right? This is Orlando, Jacksonville, Pensacola. This entire region is the Tampa Bay's viewing region. You'll be able to watch those games for free.
That's great.
You're either going to get it through Channel 66, which hasn't launched yet. It's not launching until July 1st. But it's going to be in the Tampa St. Pete market. You can actually watch those games with an HD antenna. You can go pick one up at Walmart for $20.
Wow.
Right? Plug it in the back of your TV. You're going to get a bunch of free channels, and Channel 66 WXPX, I think is the call letters. You can watch the games there for free. If you're outside of the Tampa Bay area, but in the Tampa Bay viewing market, you'll be able to watch the game on the Lightning app for free.
Wow.
Now you're out of state, still requires an ESPN Plus subscription. Everything in terms of blackouts and, if there's a national game, it's not going to be on Scripps, which is a new partner. You're still going to have to watch that game on TNT, ESPN Plus, whatever it is that you have a subscription for. So you're still going to have to watch those games, but there's no more chasing the team around the dial. Right. There's no more conflicts with the Rays like we saw during the playoffs. Well, A couple of games were on Fox Sport or FanDuel Florida, a couple were on FanDuel Sun, you're chasing things around because of conflicts with other partnerships that FanDuel had. You're not going to have that anymore. You look at, the Florida Panthers, was their first year, and I think there was a lot of discussions between the two teams. How did this work out?
Yeah.
And, I think the Lightning liked what they saw.
Yeah, I heard a lot of good things.
Look, when Steve Goldstein was here, the Panthers play-by-play guy, he talked it up a lot.
Yeah.
Right. So that's going to be the Lightning situation starting next year. That's a win for fans. Yeah. It's a win for fans because now you don't have to worry about it. They'll still carry first-round playoffs, but blackout restrictions still apply. If you're in Orlando, you're not going to be able to watch it on ESPN Plus.
Right.
You're gonna have to watch it through the app, or if you have access to this Channel 66 in some way. I don't know how all of that works, but you will still be blacked out in the local viewing area from watching it on an ESPN Plus.
There you go, man. Good stuff there. And anytime we can watch it for quote unquote free, we will take it. Erik Erlendsson, lightninginsider.com. Use that promo code JNZ. Get $10 off this season. Not just this season, but every recurring season. Support local. This has been fun doing this weekly. Enjoy your time off, my friend. And we'll talk some hockey again soon, buddy. Thank you.
Hey, feel free to reach out, man. There's still playoffs going on. I'll be more than happy to talk hockey with anybody.
You got it, buddy. And tell Kevin, I saw Kevin a couple weeks ago at the Rowdies game. I think they lost 5-0 that night. So you can definitely place the blame firmly on his head. It is all his fault. Appreciate it, brother. Thanks, buddy.
Be well.
All right. See ya. The one and only